How much do you think about undersea cables? Here in Taiwan, I'd assume not much unless you lose communications or the internet. While in Europe, which has the most subsea connections on Earth, recent incidents of cut cables have become an issue of national and economic security. In fact, European leaders say acts of suspected sabotage are among other intrusions that have put the region in a gray zone between war and peace. So, what do we know about these breaches and what happens next? I'm Bego, and this is Connected on Taiwan Plus. To guide us through Europe's and Taiwan's struggles protecting critical marine infrastructure, we have with us today Dr. Alexander Lott, who is a researcher at the Norwegian Center for the Law of the Sea at the Arctic University of Norway and is joining us from Estonia. And from the National Taiwan Ocean University in northern Taiwan's port city of Keelung, we have Professor Yachi Chiang. So good to have you both. And to set us up for this discussion, I'd like you to take us through these three cases in particular that can give us a picture of how countries in Europe and in Asia have learned to evolve their incident response. I'm going to start with you, Yachi, and let's go back to 2023 in Taiwan, where there were multiple cables to the outlying islands of Matsu, which were cut. Can you tell us why that incident or that set of incidents was so important, and was anyone apprehended for it?
Well, the cable incident in Matsu in 2023 was not the first cable incident, but I think it marks a milestone in how we deal with cable incidents in the history. There are more than one cable connecting Taiwan and Matsu, but in 2023, the two cables connecting Taiwan and Matsu were cut off almost at the same time. So that literally made Matsu a digitally isolated island. Actually, according to the news report, some residents in Matsu, they even used the SIM cards provided by Chinese telecom companies to get the internet connection. So after months of waiting for the cable to be repaired before their lives could get back to the normal, I think that sent an alarming message to the Taiwan society that what would be the impact if our cables are cut off.
And very briefly, was anyone held responsible for it?
No, it's because of the regulation loophole. So
right, and that is something we will talk about a little more. But before we go to that, Alexander, Europe's story also somewhat starts in 2023 with the Balticconnector gas pipeline between Finland and Estonia failing, and the Hong Kong flagged vessel, the New Polar Bear, was identified as the culprit. Was that a wake-up call for Europe?
I think the first major wake-up call was already the Nord Stream explosions in September 2022. That is approximately a year before the Balticconnector incident. But indeed, the similarity between the two incidents lies in the fact that in both cases, submarine pipelines were targeted. In the Nord Stream explosions case, 3 submarine pipelines out of 4 Nord Stream pipelines were damaged. In the Balticconnector incident, 1 submarine gas pipeline connecting Finland on the one hand and Estonia on the other hand was damaged, together with a couple of submarine cables connecting Sweden, Estonia, and Finland.
All right, so going back to the idea of accountability or responsibility, Alexander, I want to take you to the Peng 3, and that was a Chinese-flagged vessel. It was identified as likely having damaged 2 submarine internet cables near Denmark. And in that case, Danish, German, and Swedish Navy ships surrounded it for weeks. Can you explain what happened in the aftermath there?
Yes, it's a complicated case, in fact, because it is not entirely clear why the ship Peng 3 stopped after exiting the Baltic Sea. The ship stopped in the exclusive economic zone of Denmark. And this is because of a voluntarily established easy corridor, which enables foreign ships to exit the Baltic Straits proper, the Öresund or the belts, and leads to the North Sea via the Kattegat and Skagerrak straits. And then onwards, of course, to the Strait of Dover. Now, in the exclusive economic zone of Denmark, where the ship eventually stopped, in the exclusive economic zone, the freedom of navigation applies. So in principle, the ship Peng would have the possibility to continue its journey after exiting the Danish Straits proper, all the way to the North Sea and then onwards to the Atlantic Ocean. But instead, indeed, it stopped. Now, throughout its voyage through the Danish Straits, it was shadowed by the Danish Navy and the Danish warships. Throughout its stoppage in the Kattegat, it was also, as you mentioned, shadowed by various government ships of not only Denmark, but also Germany, Sweden, as well as somewhat further away, a Russian warship. So it was a curious case. Eventually, Denmark decided not to board the ship, and instead the authorities contacted China as the flag state, and China was willing to investigate the submarine cable cut in respect of the cables connecting Sweden. 2 cables were cut, and Sweden requested China to investigate this. What China did not allow was for the Swedish prosecutor to visit the ship, but some other members of the Swedish investigation was allowed to board the ship together with their Chinese colleagues.
Okay, so that seems like quite an isolated and a special case. Now I want to bring it back to Taiwan, where in January of this year, a China-affiliated ship was accused of cutting a communication line near Keelung, where you are, Yachi. Now, the Chongqing 39, a Chinese-named freighter, was registered in Cameroon, actually, but it was suspected of dragging its anchor across an internet cable, but it made a quick escape to South Korea. Then, in February, Taiwan detained a ship for the first time, and that was the Togo-flagged Hong Tai. The ship's captain and 7 Chinese crew members were arrested and indicted. So, Yachi, why did authorities this time succeed in arresting the crew of this ship, but not for the one in January?
As I just mentioned, shortly after the incident in 2023, the Legislative Yuan passed the revision on the Telecommunication Management Act, widening the protection to the undersea cables. So after 2023, there's a law for us to protect this kind of cable sabotage. But I think the legal setting, the legal environment regarding the maritime affairs is very different from that of the terrestrial affairs. If we drive on a car, then if we drive from Keelung to Taipei, and we are still in the same jurisdiction. But if you are on board of a vessel, then you drive away from the coast, like 12 nautical miles away from the coast, then you are entering to another jurisdiction. So this is very complicated in dealing with a jurisdiction issue. So in the case, in the case of the Shenzhen 39 vessel, I remember that the Coast Guard, they did have some kind of communication with the crew and also approached the ship, but they didn't take any further actions. So once the ship sailed away, it's really difficult, if not impossible, to take any further legal actions. So I think this time they learned from the past experience. So they detained the ship and the crew. And now, according to the press release by the Taiwan prosecuting office, they already pressed charges against the crew on the grounds of the intentional sabotage against the undersea cables.
Okay, so on that note, Alexander, and very briefly, last December, Finland detained a vessel for the first time. Did they manage to establish guilt?
The investigation is still ongoing. Indeed, Finland arrested the ship, and this signaled a change in state practice in the Baltic Sea region, because so far, as I mentioned, Peng 3 was not boarded by the Danish authorities. Now, the Eagle S, the ship that cut the cables, not only the data cables connecting Estonia and Finland, but also a very important power cable, electricity cable connecting the two states, was indeed arrested. Now, the Finns invited the ship to the Finnish territorial sea. Unfortunately, the ship captain complied with this order. And as soon as the ship had entered the Finnish territorial sea, it was boarded by the Finnish Coast Guard, as well as a, so to say, Finnish police special force. The ship was arrested, but in the beginning of March, I think, eventually released. Mm-hmm. That being said, the investigation is still ongoing, mm-hmm. and let's see how it goes.
Right. Now, while in this case authorities managed to detain the crew for investigation, it can be difficult to prove sabotage. Katja Bego, who is a senior research fellow at London's Chatham House, explains why.
That you have really clear camps now of people who say, like, all the industry people on the cable side say these were just accidents. All the maritime shipping people say, like, there is no way that the crew is this incompetent, and certainly not 3 times within 1 year. And yeah, I think so. Like shipping captains, etc., really don't think it's very credible that someone does this by accident, because it would really require kind of dragging an anchor over 100 kilometers, basically, which meet quite a lot of resistance and quite significant damage to these ships. Right? You would notice that. So it's unlikely that you do that completely accidentally. So yeah, it's very muddled, and I guess that's the whole sort of plausible deniability aspect of some of this, is exactly that, because it's very hard to sort of disentangle what happened there exactly.
And Yachi, plausible deniability, how difficult does that make it to actually arrest or point fingers or give accountability to actions by ships?
It's actually really difficult, not only because of the jurisdiction is complicated in dealing with the maritime issues. It's also very challenging to collect the evidence. So it's unless you catch the activity just right on the spot, it's very difficult to get the sufficient evidence. Also, Alexander just mentioned that actually, in the case in Baltic Sea, they managed to send some representatives to get on board to make the investigation. But in the end, they didn't find substantial evidence to build up the case. So they had to let the ship sail away. So I think that now the legal framework was drafted, in dealing with maritime affairs, or drafted a long time ago. At the time that we would not have envisioned how much impact the digital technologies upon to our modern society. So I think it's really time for us to think about to reconstruct the legal framework.
Do we need tougher laws to deal with hostile foreign actors damaging seabed infrastructure? If you're watching on YouTube, share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell and click the video next to me to learn about strategies countries are developing to deal with hybrid threats under the sea.